Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.
Hi, it's Alvin Reid sitting in for Charlie Brennan tonight. And if you wanted to hear some old folks talk nonsense, you came to the right place, not the debate. At least for three of us, anyway.
Three of us. These two are not happy with that distinction.
Hey, we got something that I provided for the set because I'm really serious about this. Behind me, we have a model of Friendship 7, which was made here in St. Louis by McDonnell Douglas. This is the craft that John Glenn first orbited the Earth in, and we should be very proud of that in St. Louis, and we should make a bigger deal of that. So I want to thank one of our viewers for letting us know that maybe that was a good idea, so I found that online.
Nice.
And she will orbit Donnybrook, as long as there's a Donnybrook.
Well done, Alvin.
All right.
Well done.
So, joining us tonight, Wendy Wiese from The Wendy Wiese Show, KTRS. Joe Holleman from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, sitting in for Bill today. Our rotating guest, but she's really a permanent fixture in our lives, Sarah Fenske, Executive Editor, St. Louis Magazine, and Jacob Kirn. Bright smile by Jacob Kirn here, Managing Editor of the St. Louis Business Journal. Welcome all. Okay, we're coming up on the election season pretty quickly with the primaries being in August. And a poll has come out that Wesley Bell has pulled within 1 point of Cori Bush. Now, this was by a PAC that was, you know, Friends of Israel, kind of American Democrats for Israel. But, Joe, they were correct on a poll in New York, which predicted that the sitting congressman there would lose by double digits, and he lost by double digits. What does that say about our race here in the Missouri 1st Congressional District?
It certainly is an attention getter for the reasons you mentioned. When I saw the organization is called the Democratic Face for Modern Israel, and they are unabashedly pro-Israel, anti-Cori Bush. And they have targeted a number of squad members, Jamal Bowman being one of them. And so they were talking about how they were going to put a poll out, and if any reporter I know, you always take polls with a huge grain of salt because it's always commissioned by one side or the other. And I don't want to pay for a poll that shows me losing. So, you know, if I have a poll, I want it to say I'm winning. So when I heard that they were putting a poll out, I was, okay. And they put out the one that says it's 1%. I was like, okay. But then I found out that they had done one on the George Latimer, Jamal Bowman race in New York. And they said it was going to be, they were favoring Latimer by 17%. And it ended up being like 16.5. So it does say at least that whoever's doing their polling was pretty right on there. So I think it at least shows to, I guess what I've always thought in my gut, like the governor's race in Missouri also, I think they're horse races. I think it's hard to say, and anything's hard to say after 2016. You know, people say, I'm going to predict what's going to happen. But I think the general feeling is, you know, you get out 4 or 5 months ahead of time, basically it becomes name recognition. And as time goes on, it gets close. I think we're in for 2 very close races that depend on factors that won't be determined until Election Day, who shows up and who doesn't.
I think a lot of people were looking at that race in New York, Jamal Bowman's race, to say this could be a bellwether for what could happen in Missouri's 1st Congressional District. They're obviously very different districts, so you don't want to say it's an exact mirror. But, you know, this was the only other member of the so-called squad who was facing a challenge from somebody in the Democratic Party, a very serious challenge, and Cori Bush is the other one. And there's a lot of talk that now that that race has wrapped up, you're going to see people from both sides, activists who want the Democratic Party to be more pro-Israel, activists who support the squad and the progressive movement, they're all going to be coming to the 1st Congressional District to fight this here. And so there's definitely definitely some resonances between those two races.
And then does Cori alter her message? I don't see her altering her message.
No,
all.
she has pretty much doubled down.
Yeah.
Right.
So
I don't think she can. She is who she is. And what I have always liked about Cori is I think she's really sincere in her beliefs. Now, that is also what a lot of people really don't like about Cori. And it's hard to imagine even something like her comments on Israel that have cost her, you know, so much with so many people in her district. She's not the kind of person who's going to be, you know, taking her finger in the wind and seeing which way it's blowing.
That's why I wrote a story about her first commercial coming out, because I was curious as to, was she going to modulate her message on Israel? She did not. You know, and so, and you know, I mean, you go with what you got you there. I mean, is probably a good way to go. I mean,
she's got something,
because then you get accused of switching then. So if you've already staked out that position, which has been well documented, to switch it now makes you maybe look even worse.
She's got some major liabilities, though, like Bowman. I mean, she's under investigation by DOJ. We've all seen that. She had this kind of bizarre thing resurface where she said that she healed someone with her hands. So getting a little bit more toward the Bowman comment. He had his 9/11 truther moment. But one thing that I think is really different on New York is that it had gotten redistricted into what I understand was a more moderate area up there. One here was redistricted a little better for Cori back a little bit. So I think they're a little bit different.
Okay. There were also several other polls, one of which that the governor's race is pretty close in the state of Missouri. Some other races. Candor, not Candor, golly, where am I living at? Lucas Coons, God, I went back in time, didn't I?
we all do.
Yeah, exactly. A little bit closer to Josh Hawley than maybe we may have thought. Any other things that stand out?
You really think that's possible?
Well, I'm just saying the poll said he's within striking distance, let's say.
I was surprised that the polls seemed to indicate that Ashcroft had younger support and Eigel had the older support. I would have thought it was the opposite.
Oh, I can't say that surprises me. I mean, Eigel kind of stands for the politics of 1950. There's a lot of young people turned off by his anti-gay positions. And I thought it was interesting to see Mike Kehoe really surging. You know, I mean, John Ashcroft, that's a name everyone knows in Missouri.
Exactly.
Here's this name I don't know that any of us really knew 3 years ago. And Kehoe sort of staked his claim as the reasonable person. At the same time, he's getting Sinkfield money. That's kind of a potent combo there.
Well, I think also when you take those early results, the name Ashcroft rings a bell. So when someone calls you 6 months before an election and you say, Ashcroft, I know that name. I don't know Kehoe. I don't know Eigel.
Right.
Ashcroft, sure. I'll vote for him. So I think as you get closer to it, and the one thing about Kehoe's campaign, they have a ton of money.
Yes,
and you are
he
going
has
to
the
see
St. Louis. He has the St. Louis recognition. There's a lot of voters in St. Louis, a lot of suburban voters. People don't remember. I mean, like 50% of St. Louis area voters are Republicans. So a lot of the people are coming from that area.
And he's a city of St. Louis kid.
Yeah,
I mean, which is unusual. We were always talking everybody's out of state. I think his appeal is certainly to the urban areas of Missouri, that when it comes down to what are we going to do, here's a person with more of a citified urban outlook on things.
I just find it interesting that both Kehoe and Ashcroft's commercials have nothing to do with anything that has to do with the state of Missouri.
Welcome to 2024.
Yeah.
Those are good commercials.
Sarah, you mentioned gay issues, and a restaurateur has closed his Bulrush restaurant in regard to our state's policies on gay issues. And I know that he's faced some backlash, like, why quit? And I kind of find myself in that camp. I mean, you know, be active, be an activist, but why stop? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, Rob Connolly, who is the chef owner of Bulrush, he was a James Beard finalist just this year, came here from New Mexico back to his native Missouri and just won so much acclaim for this restaurant. He's also just a beloved figure. He's such a nice guy. Everyone who interacts with him just adores him. And so when he came out and said, yeah, I've had enough of Missouri. I can't live in a state that hates people like me and you know, discriminates against us. It got a lot of people's attention. I certainly heard from some friends that are in the gay community who are like, oh, you know, to come out so publicly, this has already been such a tough year for them. Like, this just hurts that he's leaving and that he's saying it's about this. But on the other hand, nobody could really blame him. you know.
And one thing I thought was odd on the timing, as we were discussing, was that these proposals from Andrew Bailey, they're not exactly active. I mean, the one in terms of children getting the gender-affirming care, that was tossed by the court. The adult one had gone away. So it felt a little late to me to take a huge stand on that one in particular.
I think he's picking up on the climate in Missouri. And yes, he did mention the trans issues where some of that battle has kind of, moved on to a different battlefield. But, Missouri is still a state where every year people introduce a bill to say, let's give gay people the right not to be discriminated against in housing and employment. And every year they can't even get this thing to go to a vote. There's no support for giving gay people in Missouri that. And they had sent Connolly to London to promote the state. And he said while he was there, he just felt queasy. Like, how can he be there for the Missouri Department of Tourism when they don't even believe he should have equal rights?
And I get that conflict, but it's like Jacob's saying, it's not like this was a cosmopolitan state before he opened Bulrush. And so if he has enough fight in him to be a restaurateur in this particular climate, in this state, I would hope that he would stay open and sort of be a beacon to the community. But that's his prerogative.
One little thing that I kind of thought was that on all these issues through time, and people have ultimately been vindicated by history, but they were in the super minority, before the Civil War or whenever. What if they had just said, I'm going to leave, I'm going to go to Canada, I'm going to go to these places? I don't really like that, to be honest with you.
I guess my reaction would be more of a practical, for lack of a better word. It's his business. If he doesn't want to be here, best of luck to wherever you go. I mean, it didn't give me a reaction one way or the other. I'm sorry he felt bad and didn't feel welcome here, but everybody's got to decide what they're going to do with their money, their livelihood, and if he thinks he'd be happier somewhere else, best of luck.
But we can all have an opinion on it. I mean, and I'm not.
And I guess I just didn't.
Yeah,
I
know what I'm saying. I'll give you an example. Florida has got all kind of anti-DEI and anti-woke and all that. There's a challenge out there to tell young black kids that are going to go there on a full ride scholarship, don't go to school in Florida and at University of Florida, and tell them why you're not going to go to the University of Florida. There's like 50-50 on the columns. Don't put that on the kids. Hey, no, the kids could make a difference. So I'm kind of like you. I'm in the middle. Like, I'm not telling you not to go to school there, but I am telling you, if you didn't go to school there, you could make a difference. So, but I wish he would stay open and use that voice to maybe possibly change some minds here in the state of Missouri.
I kind of feel like the interview that he gave where he said that this got so much publicity, it got a lot of people talking, and I hope that some of these legislators that don't want to give people equal rights, that this got their attention.
Yeah. We could hope, but yeah, I doubt it. But okay, on a somber note, two gentlemen I don't want to say gentlemen, two men were sentenced to consecutive life sentences for a murder for hire scheme that left a young teacher and her unborn child dead. And when I read the story, I had no understanding why the death penalty was not pursued in these cases. And Wendy, I mean, if anything screamed death penalty, it was this case. And it was not in the county, and I know Wesley Bell had said he was not going to prosecute, death penalty cases, but this was in the city. I'm just flabbergasted that we're not there.
Well, I'm equally flabbergasted because the case of Cornelius Green, who hired a friend, I believe his name was Philip Cutler, to do away with his pregnant girlfriend. It was just chilling. It was absolutely chilling to read. And I know that this is what court reporters they're covering every single day. I have no idea in terms of the legality behind it, and I believe you were talking about the process. And once the process begins, you can't then make it a capital case. But boy, if anything should have been, it would have been this case.
Yeah, I mean, this is a heinous case. I mean, a pregnant young woman snuffed out in the prime of her life. It's horrible. Totally agree with that. However, You know, this case began when Jennifer Joyce was still circuit attorney. In my former paper, the Riverfront Times, we had interviewed Jennifer Joyce about her feelings about the death penalty. It was very interesting to hear her talk about this because I think she was a very law and order kind of person, you know. We all think of her as very different than Kim Gardner, who followed. And she said that she never wanted to take the death penalty off the table. She would never make a pronouncement like Wesley Bell made and say that she would never go for it. But that she ultimately began to realize that St. Louis City juries just weren't there. They weren't willing to go there. They, I think, have a lot of reservations about the death penalty that I myself share. And so she tried for it a couple times. Juries said no. There ended up being no one in her tenure who was convicted in a capital case. Wow. And that continued under Kim Gardner as well. In Kim Gardner's case, and in the later years of Jennifer Joyce's tenure, they did not even try. And I think that's just, they are elected prosecutors who represent the constituents, and these are constituents that aren't down for the death penalty.
And, you know, I think it's a wise strategic decision. If you're a prosecutor in a county or city that would have a liberal base, you have to figure that most of your jurors coming in, or at least to a liberal side, more than a conservative. And then you get into the complications, because if you ever sit through jury selection, not only do you have to go through the regular questions, then you have to ask them how they feel about the death penalty. And then it becomes a whole much more drawn out case where you say, I'm basically going, and when you have 2 life sentences consecutive, you're talking pretty much life without parole. So juries a lot of times love that, even people who say they're for the death penalty. And I remember our veteran courts reporters, I did some of them, said, you know, you get in there and they say, yeah, I'm for the death penalty. Then you start to think about it. But do I want to be the one?
I want to be the
I'm
one?
for it in general. I don't want to be one of the 12 saying, okay, boom. So, I mean, it probably was a strategic decision. I agree with you. You couldn't have been any more. If you were looking to describe a heinous crime, this fits every single box, clicks every one. But it seemed like it was a strategic decision, and they did get the convictions. And so now both these guys will be in prison for the rest of their lives.
Okay. Any thoughts, Jacob?
Well, I don't know that there's a big outcry about, I mean, we were talking before about, yes, we have to put these people to death. I mean, when you were talking about that, Joe, I just am reminded of all the studies showing that ultimately society pays more to kill someone. I mean, there's a lot of factors, I think, against it for me.
Okay. I've got my issues with the death penalty, but sometimes a case will come up where I say, like, absolutely, and this is one. Absolutely, once again. Okay. Well, COVID hit us. We shut down in 2019. Here we are in 2024, and test scores are low in Missouri and in Kansas. And one of the things that is being assessed to these low test scores is the pandemic. And I myself think it's time to quit playing the COVID card as far as all the ailments that kind of society have. Sarah, am I just mean-spirited?
Well, yes, you are, Alvin. Thank you for framing that question. I will say I have some good friends that are school teachers, and they are very firmly of the belief that COVID just broke so many kids. That what we did to kids during the pandemic, where we sent them home and we put them in front of screens when kids need interaction with other kids, they need to be there with a teacher in person, they became so far back from that, not just educationally, but emotionally and socially. Our schools are not all right. And I 100% blame COVID, which was just in the year 2020, for the record, less than 4 years ago that everything shut down, and it stayed shut down a long time.
Yeah, and the interesting thing to me is not that we have an asterisk anymore on these studies and these results about the scores. It's that there seems to be now a collective reckoning that what happened is wrong. And we're not talking about the hard right. We're talking about people across the political spectrum realizing that what we did to kids was the wrong thing. And it's going to take, I don't know what it's going to take to lessen this gap, but it's going to have to be extremely significant.
I have a number of things I say. I never, at the very beginning, it might have been hard right. I think early on, some people, logical, moderate people, started going, aren't we going a bit overboard on this? And the idea that kids were out of school for 2 years was ridiculous, I think, to most people with any modicum of common sense, to say to take kids who are 7, 8, who are learning every minute they're in school, not just from the teachers, but you learn how to navigate. He said emotionally and socially, to keep them away from that and basically lock them in the house. I think people early on were saying, this is too long. We need to do something. So I think that our test scores weren't that great to start with. I mean, you know, people were complaining about declining test scores.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like, oh my God, we were just shooting toward genius and then all of a sudden COVID hit. But I think the fact that to say we're blaming it on COVID, I think not COVID, but our reaction to COVID deserves blame in some avenues, and that's one of them.
Okay,
But hindsight is always 20/20,
Yeah.
right? And so, of course, you know, now we look back and we think, oh my God, this was an overreach. At the time, we did not know.
I disagree on education.
Okay,
I think
but
on
I'm talking about
education,
from a health
people were saying, wait,
standpoint.
kids are the least affected by COVID.
But the
they were the
people
ones
who were
most
kid
available to go
adjacent.
back out to,
Right.
should be the children.
But it might be worth looking forward and saying we need to devote more resources to try to lessen this gap. I mean, that might be.
Well, I hear that, okay, and all right. First, what Wendy said, we were dealing with something we had never dealt with before,
Sure.
and it's easy to say we should have done this, we shouldn't have done that, and if 100,000 people had died, you know, while people were in school and whatnot, we'd be saying another thing. Didn't happen. Luckily, I think I'm not making a political statement here, but people did get vaccinated. Okay, so I don't think we can look back and say like, oh golly, and then two, all right, it happened. You were out of school, not for 2 years, but, you know, 2 semesters or whatever. It's over. We got to, at some point, you got to say, like, hey, wherever we're at, we got to improve. We got to start today and quit blaming the pandemic on everything.
Alvin, one of the very interesting charts I saw is it dealt with chronic absenteeism. And it began, you know, sort of like with when everybody went virtual, people apparently just started thinking that showing up to things was optional. And now you have so many kids that are missing so many days in school. So I'm with you there. I do think COVID broke these schools. And what we have to do is somehow get people back into the mindset that, no, you can't just stay home because it's hard to get in or because you don't feel that
Because
well.
it's snowing.
Right.
Yeah. Now and that was a key point.
Gotta get back in person.
Thank you for bringing that up, because that was a key point of the study. It said that it was like habitual truancy became a real thing. Jacob, okay, you're not truant. All right.
I'm here.
Supreme Court decided that Missouri was wrong on it was part of a case that chastised the federal government and their role in dealing with social media entities. The Supreme Court basically didn't rule that you're wrong, they're right. It was more of a, you know, somebody else is going to decide this case. Your thoughts on that?
Standing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of think that Missouri shouldn't have been involved, but maybe for a different reason than certain people would think. I kind of am wanting to be an absolutist on the First Amendment free speech, in that if these social media platforms want to have whatever kind of content or not on their platforms, God bless. They should be able to decide. If you don't like it, you can go and start up Facebook 2.0 and you can, you know, have whatever you want. I think the government can, you know, speak to these companies just like they speak to the media all the time. The government often says, you're wrong, we don't like this, pull the story, and we don't, you know, so I don't see that big a difference there.
I mean, I see where you're going with that. I disagree with the fact, I mean, I believe that the case, I hope that somehow someone does get a standing so that they look at it. This was not just a case of the government saying, we don't like your story. This, in some cases, was some fairly heavy-handed pressure with emails where they were cussing and threatening these people over these stories, and a lot of it had to do with the aforementioned COVID. Okay, which we all thought there were vast overreactions, which you agreed to just a few minutes ago, that there were vast overreactions to COVID. It was the government's. And then you had these social media companies who were getting it from 5 or 6 different governmental departments. I think there's the government certainly has a role for the public safety to talk with media companies. But in my time at the Post-Dispatch, I have never heard of the government calling our newspaper and saying, you must pull this story. And there was some evidence submitted in the cases that didn't get heard by the justices of where it was almost borderline threatening, saying, well, you know, you guys are wanting channel access and you guys are wanting broadcast space.
I don't believe you.
And I think there's issues there that was the government trying to tailor a message, and they picked on a group of folks who they knew probably weren't used to standing up to them or in a position to stand up to them. And I'd like to see the case heard. And what the justices decide, they decide. And if they think it's fine, it's fine. But I don't like is people going, well, they said Missouri was wrong. No, they said Missouri didn't have standing, which is a different issue.
I've, from talking to some legal experts about this, they have said Missouri just kind of brought a very weak case, that there might have been a good case here.
What else is new?
That's why I'd like to see Missouri get out of like trying to make these big national headlines and shape national policies. Like, just protect the citizens of Missouri. Let the good lawyers handle this stuff.
The good lawyers. Well, here we are. It's summertime, and it's somebody's birthday.
No.
Yeah, yeah, it is.
No,
it
it's
is.
not. It was.
Yeah, well, it's not your birthday today, but it was yesterday.
Yesterday.
Right.
Oh, my land. Oh, you guys. And there are little crowns.
A little crowd. Hey.
Wow, wow, wow. Okay.
Are we going to sing?
Are we singing?
No, we're not. We are not going to sing, and we are
No TV show can handle
more
that.
lung capacity. Blow them out.
Oh, happy birthday.
You guys.
Hey.
Oh, my heavens.
Wendy is like 47.
I love you for each day. That's it. 47.
47. Hey, you can write to us and tell me how full of stuff I am at Donnybrook, care of 9 PBS, 3655 Olive Street, St. Louis, Missouri, 63108. Send an email to donnybrook@9pbs.org. Reach out to us at X, formerly Twitter, hashtag DonnybrookSTL. Give us a call on the comment line, 314-512-9094. And if you like us on a podcast, we're out there, and we sound good. They're available on all major podcast platforms. Jacob Kirn, thank you for sitting in with us today. Joe and Sarah, thank you for spinning around the orbit with Friendship 7. You guys have a great night. We're better than the debate. That's not up for debate. Have a good night.
Depends what happens.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9 PBS.